Doctor Who, despite being my favourite show of all time, it's undeniable that for the last 13 years the show has been an absolute letdown, with the individual series quality being an astounding,
I mean, it's alright, like,
at best, and absolutely catastrophic at worst. And that's not even taking into account the Chibnall era. An era that has done so much irreparable damage to the show that this new era is basically going to be a soft reboot. Again! But I can safely say that this is the first time I've been excited for new Doctor Who in about 5 years. This is the most excited I've been since Jodie Whittaker was announced as the 13th Doctor. We have a brand new Doctor in Ncuti Gatwa, an interesting looking new companion that absolutely disgracefully I'm older than, and the greatest showrunner of all time writing for this show again. Russell T Davies, back at the helm to bring this show back to its former glory once more. But before we get to all of that brilliance, we have 3 new specials to celebrate 60 years of this show, with the greatest Doctor of all time and one of the greatest companions of all time coming back. And best believe when this was announced I was beyond excited. Not only because, well, these are 2 of the greatest actors playing some of the greatest characters in the show's history, but they're being written by the best writer with a huge new budget and so much potential to do interesting stuff with them. So many questions are raised immediately just by the existence of this, like, why has the Doctor become David Tennant again? How are they going to write around Donna not being able to remember the Doctor without dying? And how are we in a timeline so blessed that all of this is happening in the year of our Lord 2023? Now, before I most likely gush about this episode for God knows how long, I just want to say that one of my biggest hopes for these specials is that Russell T Davies actually fixes some of the issues that he left between these 2. Maybe he can get a better explanation for these 2 meeting other than contriving it and saying it was destiny. Maybe we can get a further explanation for one of the only bad scenes in The End of Time Part 2. But honestly, I'm just happy to be having good Doctor Who again, given that the last episodes above a 6 out of 10 came out in 2017, and both still have massive issues in them. So, let's finally, for the first time in years, review good Doctor Who again, with The Star Beast. So the episode starts with a cute little recap showing the Doctor and Donna's adventures from back in 2008. God damn, I am old. And I really like how they present this as the Doctor and Donna separately recounting these events, because it's a good way to hook in new viewers without breaking immersion for the story, and just a casual reminder for us long-time viewers of the events of the past. And it hooks us in straight away by still asking the question of, why does the Doctor have this face again? And Donna saying the storm's about to break, referring to her memories coming back, which this story handled way better than I thought it would, but we'll get to that later. That being said, the first frame of this special being the Doctor stood here like this is irrationally funny. And then we get a look at our new title sequence, and I'm not gonna lie, I have very mixed emotions on this. On one hand, the colours are excellent and the visuals are generally very impressive. That being said, why is it so short? This intro clocks in at less than 30 seconds, the shortest of the revival by a significant amount. And while this might sound like a nitpick, I really think having it this short ruins a lot of the impact that almost all the other title sequences had. Like every other title sequence will have the beat of the music hit the same time that a name pops up on screen, and because of those 2 things happening at the same time, it gets you excited straight away for what you're about to see. Whereas here, the names just pop up and go really quickly, almost as if they don't even matter. I'll show a comparison so you know what I mean. See what I mean? It just doesn't hit the same. Now, if this title sequence is only for these specials, then this won't really matter in the end, But if this is the one that they use for Series 14 and beyond as well, I'll be really disappointed. New theme slaps though. So the unfortunately still ugly TARDIS lands and we see the Doctor waltzing out of it, and one thing I'm really glad this episode didn't do was the whole high on regeneration after just regenerating shtick that the show usually does. I have nothing against it personally, but it does get a little bit old after a while, and given that we've already seen David Tennant do this shtick before, I think it's a really great idea to just have him immediately revert back to his old self without all the eccentric goofiness for a whole episode. Considering we've only got 3. After a bit of happily waltzing around very reminiscent of the next Doctor, he sees someone struggling with boxes so he goes to help. And he comedically does this when he sees who's carrying the boxes.
Oi, do you mind?
And as if one bombshell wasn't enough for the Doctor, she then shouts for Rose.
Rose! Rose!
I knew we were so insanely back with Goated Doctor Who the second the show actually managed to make me laugh with it and not just at it, unlike the previous eras. Then we get another classic Donna moment as she manages to miss a massive spaceship crash down to Earth.
I met them last Christmas.
Why? What happened then?
Great big spaceship, hovering over London. You didn't notice?
I had a bit of a hangover.
I'm not gonna lie, as funny as it is to keep up running jokes like this, as long as they're actually funny, this does come off as very unbelievable. Because even someone as gobby as Donna would surely notice the shaking impact that hit the atmosphere as soon as the ship came down and the literal bang that it made when it hit the ground. This does come off as a bit contrived, unfortunately. So Donna roasts the Doctor for being old and wearing skinny suits, and then he meets Sean Temple Noble from The End of Time, and gets him to drive him to the crash site. And we even get another funny joke.
That says Grand Mistress.
Catch up.
I have missed good humour in this show so much. Like, it's been such a long time since I could watch the show and actually have a good laugh, like, you know. So the Doctor incorrectly uses his own catchphrase.
And let's allons-y.
For those who don't know, in English, this would translate to let's go. LaMayo. So we get some natural exposition interwoven with some comedy where the Doctor catches up with what Donna's been doing over the last 15 years. And it's revealed that she gave away all the money the Doctor got her for her wedding gift to charity. Bit of a stinger since this money was indirectly from her own dad who'd passed away, and it's not revealed why she did it yet, but what it leads into later is excellent, but we'll just have to wait to see about that. So UNIT casually arrest a broadcaster live on TV, as you do, and we see the Doctor sneak in. We cut to Donna and Rose to see Rose getting mocked for being trans, and for the first time in an embarrassingly long amount of time, I've gotta say, I'm really glad that the show's handling issues like these really well. Don't get me wrong, Stephen Moffat and Chris Chibnall, I'm sure had good intentions with their LGBT reps, but they both handled them so poorly in the show. Thasman just felt like it was trying to, and I hate to use the word, but just queerbait, because it was so surface level and superficial, and given that neither Yaz or the 13th Doctor had any depth, or really any good chemistry that was believable, it just came off as a poor attempt at getting people to ship them to get the show more attention. Which it clearly failed at. And Moffat's attempts at writing LGBT reps were so really incredibly bad. Especially with how he wrote Clara. She was written in a way as if being bisexual was a fetish, and it had no depth besides her randomly mentioning kissing women at several points. Which, even as someone who isn't a part of the LGBT, it just gave me second-hand embarrassment with how out of touch it felt to watch. It was so insanely unrealistic, it was just... ugh. Same applies to Bill, who was handled significantly better, don't get me wrong, but her sexuality also wasn't really used for anything meaningful with a lot of the time used for it. Like most of the time, the only scenes really mentioning it boiled down to just Moffat telling the audience that he wrote the first openly gay companion. Like, yeah, we know that. why don't you tell us something else about her as a person? Or, if you're gonna keep bringing it up unnecessarily, why don't you explore her sexuality more? Neither of which he actually did. By the way, I know it sounds bad saying, like, it was brought up for Bill's sexuality to be bad, but it wasn't the fact that it was brought up, it was the fact that stories would contrive themselves in a way to bring it up, but then not do anything with it, so it was literally just a waste of time. I explain it better in my Series 10 reviews, I'm not gonna lie. Like, I wrote all those scripts 2 years ago, and I'm probably never watching Series 10 again, so this is coming off the top of the dome, really. However, throughout this whole story, Rose is written in a way which actually has depth to it, and the scenes discussing it are presented very realistically and in a way which will be great for younger viewers, because it normalizes being trans, and introduces it to them in a way which is very natural, and immediately shows that the people who are opposed to such things shouldn't be listened to, because being trans is normal. And if anyone out there is against that idea or is opposed to it in any way, they shouldn't be listened to or even really acknowledged, because they just aren't worth your time. A sad fact of reality is that a lot of people will grow up experiencing racism, homophobia, transphobia, or have even been brought up around those ideals, but that isn't okay. And I'm incredibly grateful that Russell has went through the effort of introducing these images to people when they're young, and even to older viewers shown this in a way which is nuanced and interesting, unlike what Moffat did with Bill, because the way Rose was dead-named in the scene was very realistic.
Alright, looking good, Jason.
I've literally witnessed stuff like this happen in real life, unlike what Moffat did with Bill. Because if there was any scene where any homophobia was happening with Bill, it was characterized in such a cartoony way that it was impossible to take seriously, because it just felt so stupid and unrealistic in the scene. Also, this first scene addressing the topic brilliantly shows that no matter your identity, you'll always have people to stick up for you, with Donna immediately, without a second of doubt, sticking up for and defending Rose, which is fantastic. And the lines later on about feeling like she's from another planet not only make great narrative sense later, but also give us a view into her world and how she feels, which is great, putting us into her shoes and showing us how it feels from a trans person's perspective. I usually would say fuck them kids as well, because personally I think all kids are hellspawns and should get sent off to an island only for the strongest ones to survive. Bravo, Russell. You somehow managed to write in a great message to a show which is brilliant for all ages, but particularly the younger ones. Usually the demographic of this show that I think should be ignored the most. One of a kind. One thing that Russell T Davies, Catherine Tate, and Jacqueline King all nailed in this episode is the dynamic between Donna and Sylvia. They've both slipped back into their roles effortlessly and haven't missed a beat. The way they have their little mini bickers in such a funny way, while Sylvia also hilariously tries her best to stray away from any conversations involving aliens or extraterrestrial action, is so reminiscent of how they were in the past. The nagging mum and the everyman daughter dynamic never gets old and hasn't aged a day. It just makes you picture how Sylvia would have had to try and explain away so much of the stupid nonsense that's happened over the last 15 years. Honestly, I just wish her luck, because there ain't no way. And I love the way Donna talks about how she knows she has something missing, not only because it keeps up the great story beats from before.
And then sometimes I see this look on her face, like she's so sad that she can't remember why.
But this is a great way of building up more sympathy for the character, because she did have the whole arc of doubting herself, putting herself down by thinking she wasn't important, until she proved how important she was, only to have it all taken away from her. And even now, she has almost everything she wants. A beautiful daughter, a loving husband, the wonderful Wilf in her life. And Sylvia's there as well, I guess. But she still feels like there's something missing. It's so interesting to hear this from her perspective, because it almost gives Donna a depression angle. Because sometimes when you are depressed, you just feel like something is missing in your life, despite nothing actually going wrong from your point of view. And this also perfectly mirrors the 10th Doctor, because he lost himself so much when he lost Donna, and his depression caused from that led to some of the most interesting stuff the show had ever seen. So Rose sees an escape pod that fell off the ship and then meets the Meep. And I've gotta say, I absolutely love this thing. Its design is brilliant, and the practical work done on the animatronic is incredible. The way they brought this thing to life from its original comic design is incredible, and it's honestly one of the most impressive pieces of practical design the show's ever seen. As far as I can tell with my basic knowledge of filmmaking, throughout the story they use a mixture of practical work and VFX magic to bring it to life, but not once does this creature actually look like it's not there, or does its presence take you out of the story. It's been realised fantastically. Stark juxtaposition for the last era where almost nothing that wasn't practical felt real, and the CGI was embarrassingly bad. I really hope that these specials can keep that up because the VFX and general visual presentation of the last couple series has been really horrific. The fact that this show's most visually impressive series aired in 2011 and hasn't been topped since says it all, really. And back on the subject of the Meep, let's just be for real, this thing is adorable. I honestly can't think of the last time Doctor Who had an alien in it which was just cute, and its cuteness actually plays a vital part in the story, which makes it all the better that it is so cute. And Miriam Margolyes gives such a brilliant performance with her voice of the Meep, really selling you on this lost little creature's innocence, and it makes the turn for the characters later all the more impactful. So we cut back to the greatest of all time and we hear little motifs of the classic 9th and 10th Doctor theme, which gave me so many goosebumps the first time I saw it you'd be convinced I was Meglos. Unfortunately here we see the Doctor doing this with the sonic screwdriver, which I really don't like, and it seems like a very Moffat thing to be written into the story, sort of just because it looks cool. Because do we honestly believe that even for a second that the Sonic being able to make floating blueprints like this would never have came in useful before? And only now, for some reason, nearly 20 years into the revival, are we seeing this for the first time? Like, maybe if we saw the Sonic get upgraded itself, or saw the Doctor tinkering with it before the plot started, this would be more excusable, but without either of those things, this is a little bit irritating. This scene also brings up one of my biggest gripes of the story, but this one, take with a grain of salt because it is very preemptive, because there's still 2 more specials to come out after this one, and they will most likely address it. That being said, I really do wish that this story would have delved into the Doctor's identity crisis more, because this is absolutely huge. Never, not once in the 60 years that this show has been around has the Doctor used the same face twice. No, this does not count, Moffat! This is absolutely huge, and one of the lines that got me the most excited for this return was the Doctor saying, "I don't know who I am anymore." But this story doesn't really do much with it besides people asking the Doctor, and the Doctor just saying, "I don't know." 14 is just very accepting immediately that he got his face back and doesn't seem to be actively seeking to find out why very much. And yes, while it was in character for the 10th Doctor to run away from problems, particularly those that would revolve in death, or anything that would make him upset, it was one of his intentional flaws that was explored brilliantly throughout his era. Here, there's nothing to run away from, and seemingly nothing to worry about besides running into Donna again, which is another thing I hope they explain why it actually happens, because this story just asks the question and we don't find out why. I don't doubt that Russell will explain these things later on. This is why this is very preemptive criticism. This is the only time I'm writing reviews without seeing the whole series first, so I actually don't know, or at least somewhat know what's going to happen next. But just in case, in the millions to one scenario that he decides he doesn't want to be his brilliant self, that's there just in case. And it's at this point that my busy life and general slow timing on making videos nowadays anyway has caught up with me. Because despite what I literally just said, all of the specials are now released, and I now know what happens in all of them, so I will be making points addressing future episodes when needs be. And unsurprisingly, Russell did explain in a satisfying way why the Doctor's face came back in the giggle. And this episode not delving enough into it is still a bit of an issue. Also, Russell never gives an in-universe explanation as to why his clothes changed when he regenerated, which sucks. Back to the main review.
Universe, I absolutely love her. Oh, do I say things like that now?
This little line is all the more brilliant when you remember that this is one of the things the 10th Doctor never got the satisfaction of saying, even though he obviously wanted to on so many occasions.
I don't age. I regenerate. But humans decay. You wither and you die. Imagine watching that happen to someone that you... Rose Tyler.
What was the last thing you said to me?
I said Rose Tyler. Does it need saying?
I never thought I'd see the day I'm saying this, but this is a great way to develop the 10th Doctor's character by having him gain experience from the past 3 Doctors. Which, considering they're all considerably worse than him by a significant amount, is really impressive that Russell T Davies has managed to spin these negatives into a positive. Something the 10th Doctor always wanted and yearned for, but never got to have, and he can very simply express it openly now. Brilliant way to show character growth.
I don't believe in destiny, but if destiny exists, then it is heading for Donna Noble.
He will knock 4 times. It can't be stopped. Don't die with us.
No, because someone told me just recently. They said I was going to die. They said he will knock 4 times, and I think I know what that means, and it doesn't mean right here, right now.
Don't believe in destiny, you say?
Really? Wow.
So the Doctor jumps on the back of the truck and the unit soldiers open up the ship, only to be blasted by the 0 point from Fortnite, which possesses them and they start storming off. We then cut to Rose going into the shed with the Meep, where we get more goofy, silly cuteness from the Meep. A sentence that I just said completely unironically because this thing is so goddamn adorable and I can't help myself. So Donna comes barging in because Rose hasn't done the bins, literally every parent who ever lived ever, until the Meep eventually gets shown in a typically hilarious Donna way.
What the hell?
So naturally shit starts hitting the fan in every which way in another typically hilarious charming way, which this show has missed severely for so many years, with so many funny lines interwoven between this scene, and I just gotta play some of them.
We've got a bloody Martian in the shed!
Oh, wow, he's so cute.
Darling, it doesn't exist! It doesn't exist! Get off me, you space rat!
Something smells nice.
My only issue with this little funny chaotic scene is when Sylvia slaps the Doctor. Usually every slap in New Who has been incredibly unjustified and written in a way which makes the character unlikable. Because it is literally assault. I don't know about you, but I'm pretty sure assault isn't justified most of the time. But here, despite being played for laughs, but still not being funny, here you can at least justify Sylvia wanting to keep the Doctor away from Donna, given the severity of what she knows can happen.
Because if she remembers, just for a second, she'll burn up. You can never tell her.
So here, while I still don't like that this is played for a laugh, I'm glad there's at least a somewhat justifiable reason for it. For once. Also, unfortunately, the next scene highlights for me one of the biggest issues in any of these specials, and that's how, in this episode, the Doctor is so remarkably irresponsible and seemingly negligent to keeping Donna safe with how he talks and acts around her. While this story tries to justify it with this line,
You said if she sees you again, she will die.
Well, no, if she remembers me, that's slightly different.
and yes, while that is in line with what the Doctor had said before,
If she ever remembers me, her mind will burn and she will die.
that doesn't give the Doctor reason to be so irresponsible with his identity in front of her, like not even being able to think of a made-up name like John Smith, asking questions about things he shouldn't know, using the sonic screwdriver in such a blatant way, fucking giving it to Donna to hold, talking about knowing Kate when Unit is mentioned, which would obviously immediately raise suspicions, and even casually mentioning that he has 2 hearts, and when Sylvia tries to correct him by saying he's being metaphorical, he just shrugs it off.
Like a metaphor, like 2 minds, don't you?
Considering the danger that this puts Donna in, and that the Doctor wouldn't even go near her in the end of time considering the risk, and the fact that her remembering his face almost killed her, this comes off as insanely out of character and irresponsible for the Doctor. And considering that this episode was written by the greatest character writer for this show ever, probably one of the greatest character writers ever for any show ever, who's given us multiple of the best contributions to literature and fiction as a whole, it's incredibly surprising and disappointing that Russell would write the Doctor this way, especially considering that the 10th Doctor was his magnum opus character, and here he is writing the 14th Doctor as an irresponsible moron. When did Stephen Moffat start writing this episode? Easily the worst aspect of this entire episode. It's a massive L in every regard. Honestly, it's the biggest L of all of these specials. Another huge L is that after this story showed us some great trans representation stuff, it gave us this terrible scene where the Doctor assumes the Meep's pronouns as he starts... And first of all, to start off with, makes no sense as a whole because of the Doctor's knowledge of almost every species that ever lived ever. Like, are we seriously expected to believe that the Doctor wouldn't recognize the Meep's given gender or required pronouns, given how smart this character has been shown to be throughout this entire show? And also considering that in Wild Blue Yonder, he correctly identifies the gender of literal, actual bones of an alien species, this scene comes off as incredibly forced. It's also written in a Moffat sort of way where you have to sacrifice logic or characters' established attributes just to get the outcome you want.
How was this made? Seriously, how was this ever acceptable? This could not have flown back then, even then, right?
So Rose corrects the Doctor, which would never happen because the Doctor is smart, and the Meep gives quite possibly the worst response you could ever imagine.
My chosen pronoun is the definite article.
Ignoring the fact of how cringe this is on its own, it's just a completely unnecessary scene on its own, and I think the reason all of those loser out-of-touch boomers were crying about this episode, literally just having a trans person in, wouldn't at all be validated by anyone else on the internet if this scene just didn't exist. But to be fair, people who were complaining about that in the first place, they seriously just need to go outside and get a life. Trans people be like, I'm trans. Society. Okay.
Mayonnaise on an escalator! It's going upstairs, so see you later! Bye-bye!
So the Meep explains why the Wrath Warriors are after the Meep, and the possessed unit soldiers and the Wrath Warriors start scrapping in the house. Excellent scene interwoven with classic Russell T Davies action and charm and humour. However, another one of this episode's biggest issues is showing off when the Doctor uses the sonic screwdriver to make a bloody force field to protect the nobles, and this is a massive issue. Sure, the visual interactive blueprints are a bit of a minor issue, but this is absolutely huge. Imagine how useful this would have been 100,000 times before right now, but it was never used before and will most likely never be used again, because if it is used again, it will kill any tension for future episodes if the Doctor can just put a force field in front of himself, willy-nilly just because the script says so. Why is Russell pulling a Moffat? It's seriously so disappointing to see the GOAT write in such a terrible, contrived way like this. And it continues this streak of shit when the Doctor manages to resonate concrete in a matter of seconds so they can escape through the lofts.
Rose, I'm trying to resonate concrete.
I don't think the idea of resonating concrete is bad, but when it's done this quickly, it comes off as even more contrivances on top of the stack that this episode is quickly piling up. And the episode was going so well. So the Doctor takes them to the place where I sell drugs to kids, and then comedically yet seriously pulls a court session out of nowhere to invoke the Shadow Proclamation. Remember the Shadow Proclamation? Well, I do. And hopefully, unlike the last time it was mentioned, Russell actually uses it as a recurring theme in Series 14 and beyond, which would be great for world building, which the first era was so good at. So after pointing out the obvious issues with that last fight scene, like the taxi being unmarked and that the soldier wasn't dead, though if they didn't want anyone dead, it doesn't explain why they'd do this. The Doctor comes to the natural conclusion that the Meep must have been lying and was using its cute persona and voice to trick people into helping it. And the switch up in Miriam Margolyes's performance at this point is absolutely fantastic. The twist itself, on the other hand, I'm not so sure, because I've heard multiple people say they weren't expecting it, and many others say that they did, but I can't really comment on it because I know the original story, so I knew this would happen eventually. But personally, I think if you didn't know, then the episode handled the twist pretty well.
Stupid woman with your weird child.
Well, that was just completely unnecessary. So the Doctor cleverly ensures the safety of himself and the nobles, and Donna starts questioning him in the car, showing some of that classic Donna doubt and regret for not saving her money. And we get more of a hint that Donna is starting to remember the Doctor, which still, for some reason, completely unfazes the Doctor, and only Sylvia seems to be worried about it. What is happening? Why did this episode start taking such a massive nosedive out of nowhere? So the Meep reverts to that of a cartoon villain simply hell-bent on destruction because plot, and plans on using the dagger drive to wipe out 9 million people in London, and for some reason the Doctor doesn't even try to do his usual reasoning shtick for some reason.
Yeah, essentially what happened is all the animatronics, they just for some reason changed for some reason, right?
Usually, in a well-written Russell T Davies episode, I would say this could act as a subtle nod towards the character needing to retire because he's wearing himself out. But this episode does very little of the Doctor's identity crisis, unfortunately, until the very, very end, which is another huge shame. Maybe instead of wasting time with this cringe scene, we could have been shown the Doctor attempt to do his usual spiel, but he actively fucks it up and makes it worse. That seems like the sort of thing Russell would usually do. You know, intentional character flaws, something he absolutely excelled at, but nah, because this scene was clearly so important.
Home and then you'll never see me again.
You're assuming he as a pronoun.
What?
So surely the goat saves them. Glad she's seemingly a recurring character because she has enough sass and charisma to carry very simple scenes well. So Donna shockingly goes to help the Doctor and calls him by his name, which is where the suspense for this episode would be through the roof, but unfortunately the trailers had already shown that Donna was in the other 2 episodes, so they're nowhere near as intense, given that most people already know that she'll survive regardless. But given I know someone who went into these episodes completely blind, I know how effectively they work on their own. Basically my take on the Sim Master reveal in World Enough in Time, but in reverse. If you don't know, just watch the video, it's good. So the Doctor tries to stop the Meep ship, but then the Meep deadlock seals the ship and puts down a barrier, and only now does the Doctor show a sudden interest in trying to keep Donna safe. Don't get me wrong, 14 is a brilliant incarnation of the Doctor, but he's written in such a mixed way in this episode. He's extremely inconsistent in one scene, but then he can be the brilliant Doctor we all know and love in another. It makes him really annoying to watch in this episode. However, that being said, this next scene is absolutely brilliant, where the Doctor has to come to terms with the fact he has to kill Donna. Direct juxtaposition to what he'd said earlier in the episode.
I won't be the one who kills her.
This is also an absolutely fantastic parallel to the end of time, where the Doctor has to sacrifice himself to save Wilf, and he has a mental breakdown over it. But here, he has a mental breakdown because he has to sacrifice Donna to save London.
Why does it have to be this?
Even more evidence of David Tennant being the best actor to play the role of the Doctor. Because when you look at this purely logically, it's such an easy decision to make. One life versus all of London. But that becomes such a difficult decision to make when you know the person you have to kill, and have such a close connection to them. Especially when she's done so much for the Doctor, and the Doctor had to lose her in the first place. And I love that all this time later, the Doctor still won't accept Donna for not thinking she's important, and even gets angry at her for thinking that she's nothing. It's such a great way to keep in line with what made their dynamic so brilliant in the first place. The fact that the Doctor sees something in everyone and Donna could do the same but never to herself, it's brilliant! So the Doctor reawakens the Dr. Donna, and we get the hilarious reveal that the Doctor left a bit of his subconscious in Donna's mind, which is why she gave away all of her money to charity. Which is such a great reveal, and it had me giggling like a little bitch the first time I'd seen it.
Oh, I'll show you destruction, mate.
We are so incredibly back, it is insane. So you know that thing in Last of the Time Lords that everyone complains about? Just saying that the Doctor reversed time and there was no consequences, even though if you actually watch the episode, they literally explain why it happens and it makes perfect sense. Well, for some reason, Russell decided to forget how to write temporarily and actually did that resolution for this story. Are you fucking for real? This is such a lazy way to write this story. It's actually so incredibly over. Like, why would the Doctor and Donna even stop in this machine, suddenly just rebuild all of the roads and buildings that the dagger drive destroyed in the first place? That doesn't make sense!
Ah, damn it! I'm about to lose my freaking mind!
And it is never explained as to how this happens. So Donna starts dying, and this scene is excellently done and really plays up the emotion well, and both actors are killing it. But like I said before, it doesn't really work amazingly for me personally because I already know she's gonna survive. My friend said it had him on the edge of his seat, however. It's such a perfect ending to the Meta Crisis storyline. Donna knowing that she can die happy and content, having saved the world and getting back what she lost at the same time. It would really suck if this was undone completely randomly.
What? You're not dead.
Huh?
Okay, so it turns out that Donna passed down some of the Meta Crisis to Rose, and this would allow Donna to survive. This on its own I actually don't have a problem with, but this reveal plays itself off as so incredibly clever when there's literally no hints towards this throughout the entire story. Like, how the fuck was anyone on Earth going to think that Rose using a shed as a space to make toys was her subconscious memory of the TARDIS? Maybe if she used something that resembled a TARDIS more than a shed?
It looks like a fucking TARDIS!
And even the explanation of the toys being the monsters that Donna and the Doctor had faced, that actually would be a satisfying payoff. But we aren't shown any of them in the episode previously until this flashback. And while I think the idea of Rose being able to live with it so well because the Doctor isn't definitively male or female is a good idea in concept with an important message, because this episode plays this reveal off as so incredibly self-indulgent and smart, as if this was the plan all along, it just comes off as a bit annoying. Because you can guarantee that when Donna was saying binary and Journey's End that it wasn't referring to the meaning of binary gender, considering that she was talking about fixing the TARDIS. And while I don't have a problem with the explanation of how Donna survives, this scene is so incredibly self-indulgent in thinking that it is clever, it honestly gives off Moffat vibes, and that is not a good thing. And it only gets worse when somehow Donna and Rose can just let it go?
What? Huh? What?
That doesn't make any sense whatsoever! So, all this time, the Doctor lived with this trauma from losing Donna. She could have just let it go? Pardon the French, but why didn't you just do that in the fucking first place? And also, what is this?
We've got all that power, but there is a way to get rid of it. Something a male-presenting Time Lord will never understand.
And I am saying this with complete and full honesty. Genuinely, what does this mean? I haven't got a single clue what this is supposed to mean. I've asked everyone I know who's seen this episode what they think this means, and none of them have given us a definitive answer. Hell, I even went on the absolute hellscape that is Doctor Who Twitter for the first time in probably like 4 years because it's such a toxic shithole, and I still don't know what this is supposed to mean. Like, I've seen a few people praising Russell for putting the line in. You already know the type of fan they are. Toxic positivity type beat. But because of the toxic positivity mindset, because it's so vapid and devoid of actual opinion, of course none of them ever elaborated on why they would like the line. They just said, bravo. But why? It just doesn't make any sense to me as to why it's even here. And even if they could just get rid of it out of their body, how the hell would the Doctor not know that? You know, considering how intelligent of a character the Doctor is meant to be. And the definite worst part of that self-indulgent bullshit is that it completely undermines Rose accepting her identity, which would actually be a really hard-hitting and impactful scene, but because it's preceding such a shit scene, it really undersells how important someone coming to terms with their identity is. So the Meep goes away after a cryptic message which hopefully will get a payoff in series 14 or 15, and they go back to the TARDIS. And I've got to say, this thing is absolutely magnificent. First of all,
would you look at the size of that monster?
But everything about this TARDIS is so clean and chic that it just works so perfectly. The console looks brilliant, and for the first time in 6 years, it finally has that aura back to it. Gone are the days of the cheap looking, dimly lit, then overlit crappy cave. Hello the future! And so brings this episode to an end. Exactly the way you would expect it to end.
One tiny little trip.
12 seconds later.
Oh my god,
We can end up anywhere in time and space!
I said so!
So, that was the Star Beast. And I've got to say, this episode has gone down in my estimations quite a bit upon further rewatches. While I still think this episode is a fun and fine watch with David Tennant and Catherine Tate absolutely killing it, as if their series wasn't 15 years ago, and all of the classic Russell T Davies charm and writing is there, the plot, on the other hand, in this episode is incredibly questionable at times, particularly in the second half. Like, there is so much incompetence in this script that it is honestly surprising, given the track record of the man who wrote this. Like, why did Russell make the sonic screwdriver in this story so incredibly overpowered? This was an issue that came around after he was showrunner, but he's massively exacerbated it with this story alone. Like being able to make high-functioning shields out of nowhere and resonate in concrete as quickly as it does. And on that note of the Doctor, I cannot believe how Russell writes him in this story. While obviously David Tennant is as brilliant as he always is, this man is just the definitive Doctor. The Doctor is written incredibly moronic in this story, more specifically with how he acts around Donna. Like, he acts like being around her is such a negligible thing when, lest we forget...
Just go to her now, go on, just run across the street, go up and say hello.
If she ever remembers me, her mind will burn and she will die.
Yet throughout this story, he acts incredibly doctory around her, gets her actively involved with the aliens, casually mentions he has 2 hearts, and even hands her the sonic screwdriver as if it's nothing. What is wrong with you, you absolute doylem? How have you so conveniently forgotten about something so major in your life that brought you that much grief that it had a major part in your actions leading to this? This is just so unlike you. And while I don't want to get political in any way here, because I honestly couldn't give a shit about anyone's political leanings whatsoever, do whatever the fuck makes you happy as long as you aren't hurting anyone is my perspective. But the way Russell wrote in some of the lines in this story comes off as incredibly pandering and forced, which is mad, considering this man's work on Doctor Who alone, he has the best reps, even though Zara was a long time ago, which is a bit embarrassing. But also consider his works on the masterclasses such as It's a Sin and Queer as Folk. But for some reason in this story, he bends the narrative and sacrifices the logic of some scenes just to put in lines like this.
My chosen pronoun is the definite article.
And like I said before, as if the Doctor isn't intelligent enough to know stuff like this anyway. And the Meep plot just fucking dissolves the second the turn happens. Despite this episode having great performances for the first time in forever, except Yasmin Finney, I'm afraid.
She can't act. She's terrible. I don't know how to tell her.
Loads of charm, great humour, and excellent character stuff interwoven throughout. I'm afraid, overall, it's mid. It's mid. There's too many little issues that stack up throughout the whole runtime and actual nonsense at points to call this episode anything relating to good. While undoubtedly this is the best episode in years, overall, It's pretty disappointing, and it's a pretty disappointing way to start the new era of this show. Something that cannot be said about the next episode, because up next is Wild Blue Yonder.
Really? This? In my house? Yeah. Not in my house, boy.
You shut the fuck
But
up.
also,
You shut the fuck
let it
up.
get you a little bit.
You shut the fuck up. You shut the fuck up. I hope you die in a fire.
So the doctor tries to shop. So the doc. Fuck. And the. Oh my god. I'm so old. And not even being able to think of a made up name. Bollocks. Oh my god. This is why you don't record on New Year's Day.